Next up, we are going to engage with the tactical section of the course. So having completed all the positional variations with knight d5, now we are going to look into the bishop takes f6 variations. And as usual, we are going to start with some of the sidelines, less important variations, the kind of a warm-up method to see what awaits later on with the main variations. So we check out the usual Sveshnikov biz a6, knight a3, or bishop takes f6 already playable here. We are actually going to go with this move order, but you need to know that, of course, knight a3, b5, bishop takes f6 is also playable for white. And here too, we are going to recapture with g, not with the queen. But once again, if white wants to be very, very meticulously precise, they take right away, as now queen takes f6 is essentially illegal because of knight c7 check. So take knight a3, b5, of course, knight d5, and f5. Now, a little detour here. You need to know that bishop g7 is also a very interesting variation here, often transposing, but it has its own idea, which is to play knight e7 next, trade the knights, put the other bishop on b7, and then start sacking pawns f5, d5, and have a fun life with the two bishops. But this course instead focuses on the even more confrontational and perhaps, I don't know if it's more ambitious, but this is considered to be the biggest main line of the Sveshnikov, so let's go with that. This is the big main line, and we are big boys and big girls, and we love main lines, so let's do that. And for now, in this particular chapter, we are going to first look at a side variation, which is going to be 11g3. This is a not so ambitious move, but it certainly has its points. White wants to develop the bishop to g2, fianchetto the bishop, cover e4, exert pressure on the diagonal. A very, very sensible idea indeed. We're going to play bishop g7. Capturing the pawn is not worth our while, since after bishop g2, f5 would lead to a catastrophe on account of queen h5 check. And so we can't defend the pawn, so there's no point in pursuing that. Instead, we are going to develop first. Bishop g2 here is going to be our main line, but actually there's a fair bit for us to get through here, in particular with e takes f5. But before that, let me show you one more variation here. After c3, now we do take e4, and after bishop g2, we castle. So now f5 is going to be put on the map. Bishop takes e4, and f5 comes with a big fat tempo. If you ask my personal opinion, it makes very little sense to combine g3 with c3. Those are two very different ideas which make perfect sense on their own, but mixed together it just leads to a very awkward concoction that white should not get too much out of. Rook b8, and I'm glad that we are actually discussing this first, because some of the ideas you're going to see in this variation are going to be very important for the immediate recapture line, which is going to be, of course, noticeably better for white. So the point of rook b8 is that we're kind of doing this both sides excite us kind of attitude or play, where now we have accomplished quite a bit in the center, but moving these pawns up further would create weaknesses that we shouldn't undertake unless we can get significant gains. And so instead, what we are doing here is that we are potentially creating a new front by playing a5 and b4 and trying to soften up the position a little bit on the queen side too. This partly comes from the fact that the bishop is missing from its most common diagonal, and so white is lacking the a4 counterplay. And also when we push the queen side pawns up, the light squares will be far less dominated by the white minor pieces, once again, due to the absence of the light squared bishop on that diagonal. So knight c2 and a5. And we are calling it a day here. b4 is already on the map. We can always play bishop e6 as well. Yeah, we have got a very happy and safe position. Also know that e4 95, of course, is doable. So that one you also need to consider at times. And also, there is a tactic here that is quite important. At times when we go bishop e6, knight f4 can be quite awkward to meet with take and then take on c6. So that's why we held the bishop back and focused on this queenside expansion. Righto. So the sensible move, of course, after bishop g7, other than bishop g2, is to capture. So now after bishop f5, bishop g2, the bishop thrives on the long diagonal. It backs the knight on d5, exerts pressure on c6 and a8 even. This is perfectly sensible and we need to respect it. Bishop e6 back, c3. Obviously, the knight is en route to c2, e3 as usual. Castles, knight c2, and a5. See, I told you. So this idea, again, is on the menu very much so. Castles, rook b8. And now we are going to branch out into 3 big lines at move 17. Isn't learning openings great fun nowadays? So, well, at least we are going to learn some middle game themes and important plans and strategies. So, let's begin. Knight e3, f5. And this, folks, is a very, very great pedagogical moment for you to understand what I consider to be the core of opening learning, which is to understand your moves and consequences. Remember how I told you that after f5, you need to watch knight f4? Well. Turns out, after knight e3, you don't need to worry about that, because if knight f4, we can take f4, and that hangs e3. So now you can make a very important memory that when knight e3 is played, then this knight f4 idea doesn't work. So now f5 makes perfect sense. f4, king h8. Now, obviously, knight f4 is not on the menu. King h8 makes perfect sense, sidestepping all kinds of checks and the diagonal in general. It's one of the most frequently played prophylactic moves in the entire Sveshnikov from Black's perspective. Queen h5, and now we play e4. Now, here too, I would like to stop for a second. This kind of rigid structure, where the central pawn mass has been completely blockaded and none of our free pawns can move forward at all, this is typically bad news for us, because we thrive on dynamism and aggressive play and the pawn mass being able to create all kinds of problems. But because of we have made steady headway on the queen side and b4 is pending, now all of a sudden our bishops are actually pointing quite intimidatingly towards the queen side, and because of the king side has been closed down, we now look to see a new and look to open up a new battlefront on the queen side, and consequently, we're still happy and in fact quite like our position. Actually, we call it off here, so I'm glad that I had this big spiel right now. Our plan is to play b4, create a weakness on the queen side, and pursue our agenda on that side of the board. Meanwhile, it's crystal clear that although white did manage to cancel out all kinds of kingside play by black, they themselves cannot create enough play on the king side that would make up for this rather obnoxious oncoming b4, let's call it attack on the queen side by us. So that was knight e3. Immediate queen h5 has a very similar vibe. f5. Think again, knight f4, good, not good? No. Again, we are fine, because after knight f4, we can drop the bishop back to f7, hitting the queen with a fat tempo, and so knight f4 just loses its meaning. So the main line is knight e3, once again, similar to our previous variation, king h8, and now, of course, there are lots of opportunities to transpose like f4, e4. If rook d1, which is obviously a move that has independent value, then we go b4. This is what we always want to play when kingside kind of feels like a sterile territory, a sterile territory where we can't break through. Now, if g4, The idea being that if you take then bishop e4 and all of a sudden the white pieces are really heavily dominating the light squares, we just go like, okay, let's see where that queen is going. Queen h3. Know that, of course, queen f5 would have lost the piece to bishop d5. Shout out to the prophylactic king h8. They can't retake with check. We always want to understand our moves. And of course, after queen h3, now we can just take on c3, take c3, take g4, and then bishop g6. And now white is the side that proudly owns 4, no less than 4 isolated pawns. So even if now the light squared blockade is complete, which typically is a tragedy from the Sveshnikov player's perspective, because of the pawn structure is so rotten for white, there is absolutely nothing that we need to worry about. Even the queen trade is actually completely on the cards, because once again, the endgame scenario cannot possibly be worse for us, given the white pawn structure. So happy days. So that was g4. If rook d2 instead, that move is designed to keep the rook out after the trade on c3. Take is still played, and now we go a4. This is a funky little move. We are trying to push that pawn as far down on the board as possible, which is going to make our threats of taking a2 genuinely meaningful. Secondly, it also supports a invasion that rook d2 was meant to cancel out. Rook d1, a3. And now again, 2 moves. If h4, bit mysterious, I suppose back rank is now opened up, then bishop f7, queen f3, bishop g6, relocating the bishop, and now both e4 and f4 moves are on the cards, and winning this pawn is actually not going to be a lot of joy for white, as now the tactical threats are definitely on our side. f5 is hanging, knight a5, knight c4 is a very, very common and annoying threat. Yeah, overall, it looks like we have got a very complex, messy position with chances to both sides. If instead queen e2, then we are going to go knight a5. This again is an idea of removing the knight from harm's way on the long diagonal and eyeing with the c4 square at times. Knight c2, queen d7. Knight e3. White is doing their absolute best to now cash in on the d6 pawn, but it's a little bit too late, as now we pick off a2, and now the a3 pawn is becoming a very, very annoying customer from white's perspective. And that closes that line. I would like to go back to the end of that line, though. I accidentally pressed the back move rather. So yeah, a3 pawn is a royal pain. The knights are a bit wonky now because they all had to go backwards in order to win the pawn on d6, which in the end, in my opinion, turned out to be not that great of a deal. So yeah, we are doing absolutely fantastically here, no questions whatsoever. Knight a3 is well met, by the way, by bishop b3. And then after rook d6, queen a4, there is a lot hanging. The rook, the knight, the rook. Yeah, that's just not a feasible scenario at all. All right, so back to our main move here on move 17, which is going to be queen d2. Again, white's main idea is to try to double up on the d file and hurt us on d6. And our idea is going to be very similar to what you saw in the last line. Do stuff on the queen side, let the pawn go. In that spirit, we go f5, we go queen d7, and here knight e3 immediately achieves white's goal of attacking d6 in a very annoying way, but it's very easy to deal with. We actually keep the pawn in this case and instead opt to just create play on the king side. And although here too, white does manage to obtain a light squared blockade and our bishop on g7 looks really, really silly, I would also like to invite you to observe that the knight on c2 is not exactly a piece to write home about either. And it's very important to note that we do have some tactical potential to exploit the light squares around the white king. And so this position is certainly one where despite the limited material, black has got some very annoying chances to hurt white around the king with queen f5, f3, queen h3, etc. So to put it very simply, it's easier to play for black. Rook e1 is the more common and better idea instead of going up to d6 right away. King h8, and now we split again. If knight f4, which is funnily enough playable here, and that was one of the main ideas behind rook e1, except I forgot to tell you about that. So now the erroneous capture on f4 would allow bishop takes, queen takes, rook takes e6, with a preferable position for white. But we don't have to do that. Once again, we can just sidestep all this silly business with taking a2, knight h5, bishop b3. That move is designed to tie the queen to d2, as c2 would hang. And now we have got two ideas. Take, and then take d6, which is met by take, and a very problem-free endgame for us. f3, take b4, and yeah, we have got the 7 frag checks covered by rook f7. The game is going to fizzle out into a draw, no problems. And if they take on d6 right away, then again we take, Hikaru style takes, and e4 again, and we are almost certainly going to transpose, there we go, into the previous line. And this pin saves the day, so to speak. An incredibly drawish rook ending on the board. It is what it is, folks. Sometimes we have to accept the draw. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us almost to the main line. Just one more little trickery. a3, with the idea of knight f4, but not allowing us to capture the pawn on a2. In this case, we go e4, and we go like, well, thank you very much. We don't want to deal with your bishop anymore. Knight f4, if f3, we take, and we get knight e5 in. Bishop g2, knight c4, and now, once again, our piece activity compensates for the damaged structure. We trade into opposite-colored bishops. We have seen this theme a lot of times already in the Sveshnikov. And after rook e8, we have got some very, very nice, harmonious piece placement. I would like to draw your attention to the very nasty check, followed by penetration plans, which means that they probably are best advised to start trading in order to avoid the biggest dramas, kicking some pieces, but our kingside attack is still on. So once again, white is best advised to just trade like mad. We are best advised to avoid it like mad. And we have got a very complex position again, where white has the material, we have the fun. No problemo. And so after e4, if knight f4, then bishop b3, the evergreen theme of hitting c2, but now we are dodging the queen trade, as this queen on d6 is a little bit jammed in. They are best advised to run for the hills, otherwise ideas like knight e5, knight c4 would have been particularly annoying, and that is the idea still that we are going for. And despite being a pawn down, black is enjoying a very, very pleasant, dynamic, healthy position indeed. And so, on to the main line of g3, which is bishop g2, funnily enough. And here an interesting idea is going to be played, which I believe is potentially going to catch one or some of our opponents a little bit off guard, because our chosen move, f4, which happens to be the best move on the board, by the way, is only third most popular in most databases, and it's third by a significant margin too. So we are talking about FE being about 50%. Another move, which I believe might be castles, about 25, and f4 is something like 17% of the games. And yet it's easily the best choice. The idea is that A, we shut the bishop on g2 in for good, which is always a huge news. B, f4 is almost never well capturable by white, because it resurrects the bishop to a degree that is simply not worth the pawn at all. And last but not least, it also cuts out a very important maneuver for white to back the d5 knight. And so very often we follow up this f4 idea with knight e7 challenging the d5 knight, indeed. And also note, because this is going to play a role in later mainline variations, f4 does release tension, right? But it doesn't give up the idea entirely of challenging e4, since we have another f-pawn that we can play f5 with. Now, that is not going to play a major role in this variation, but it's worth mentioning because we are going to see that very concept later on. Righto. So if take c3, we just castle and we happily give up f4. If knight f4, then after queen g5, white is already on the verge of defeat. So queen h5 is played to prevent that. And now we go after the king on e1, rook e8, queenside castles, a sad necessity. But knight e5, bishop g4 threats were very, very strong already. And now rook e5. Note the very important e5 square that we can use for multiple pieces depending on where the king goes. And yeah, queenside castles in the Sveshnikov is a rarely seen idea, and for a very good reason. b4 is very easily on the map, and it rips into the white king's defenders very effectively. So yeah, it's ill-advised, and indeed we are already looking to carry out a decisive attack here. So for that reason, gf is no bueno. c3 is the most typical move. Castles, castles. If knight c2, understanding our moves again, white wants knight b4, and so we go a5. a4, we take, and bishop a6 is a surprising twist in the story, but a very logical one, since now we are cutting off castling. If bishop f1, then we have got two choices. We can just go back to c8, or we can take on f1. I will show you bishop f1 first. Take, knight e7. Note again the timing of knight e7 when neither of these knight moves are available to white. f5. Told you so. And we have got a very, very cool attack. I would be, of course, playing that idea if I was playing for a win. Bishop c8 is a bit of a draw offer. If they go back to g2, then bishop a6 is a draw. Whereas if knight b4, we play the very ugly but very handy knight a7, hanging the b4 knight. And now we actually dodge the draw offer. And we go knight c8, knight b6 with a complex game. Interesting stuff. If b3 after bishop a6 with the idea of c4, then we go knight e7 again, c4, take. And now it doesn't make any sense to take with c, because then white can't castle. So we have two lines, ed and queen d. If ed, we go bishop c8 again. The more has done its job, the more can return, I think is the expression. The more with double O, the moreish. Castles, bishop d7, rook a3, queen g5. And now we're piling up beautifully on the king side. f5, bishop g4. Lots of intimidating moves on the cards. I really like black's position here because we have a clear agenda on the king side. And I don't see what white is doing. The c2 knight in particular is a very, very sad customer in this line. If queen d, then queen b6, hitting b3. Queen d3, rook b8. White is struggling here. Rook a3 and d5. Oh, love it. You've got to love these pawn moves in the Sveshnikov. It's so good. Just when it looks like it's a complete impossibility to play d5, the decisive breaks always take place on the most protected, bolstered squares. This is a textbook example. See, the impossible queen d5 looks very sad on account of, I will show you what, and ed5, rook e8 with e4 ideas incoming also looks absolutely dire straits. Although I must admit that f5 also looks very enticing in this position, and I think I would be slightly leaning toward that idea in this particular situation with e4 f3 ideas for sure. Yeah, I think that's where my head is. And if queen d5, then a4, keep on sacking. Rook a4, rook d8, queen c2, castles, bishop takes c4, and now these two are hanging. Still hanging. And that is the key idea. And white is losing because the c1 rook is going to be unstoppably attacked next with either fg or f3. And yeah, it's just too clumsy. Too clumsy, and we are doing great. And that takes us, friends, to castles, which is our main line, knight e7. If now knight c2, the knight is too late, we play bishop e6. So white didn't have time to get the knight in on d5, queen d2. And of course, now we cut that out, even knowing that f4 is hanging. But of course, gf is really bad on account of bishop h6. So rook d1 played, and bishop g4 is our annoying move, provoking f3, bishop e6. And now we are happy to give up the d6 pawn. We have seen these ideas before. Dark square counterplay is going to be rock solid. Now g3 is very loose. Take, queen d2, queen f6, and huge dark squared counterplay is imminent. I actually prefer black despite the material deficit, which is probably the most commonly used, of one of the most commonly used phrases throughout this course, for a very good reason. Okay, so if instead of knight c2 they take e7 immediately with a capture, and now again knight c2 is going to be our main move. If queen h5, which is a very commonly played move indeed in this entire bishop takes f6, the tactical variation, we still will try to set the board on fire with f5, knight c2, take g3, and play f4. A very common theme, we use the f-pawns twice in order to rip white's king as defenses apart. Knight d5 can't be allowed, or it can, but we need to be prepared. And now we have threatening takes. We are also looking to take. Note that knight b6 is not threatened on account of queen a7. We have got a very, very healthy position without any doubt whatsoever. So knight c2 is more logical, again trying to come in via b4, and again we're going to say, nah, this is not happening. Queen h5 is going to be our main line. Knight a3 is met by rook b8. If now c4, then we are going to capture, take, and queen g5. A very interesting move that leaves d6 hanging by two different pieces, but we're trying to build up the pressure on the king side as best as possible. Bishop g4 is our plan, by the way. Queen d6 is, I think, best met by bishop e6 when the b file, the d file, there is just too much going on there for us, and it's just too easy play for us. Whereas now we know the jam. It is just simply dark squared counterplay, even if they don't take on d6. Queen h4 is going to be unpleasant, but yeah, that is definitely a slip, by the way. So let's just leave it here. Bishop h3, and yeah, queen h4, bishop g2, and queen h4, g5 back is a potential drawing mechanism. Know that h5 is a threat here. So yeah, this could be a draw, but good luck for white finding all of these moves coming all the way here. So instead of c4, queen d3 makes more sense. In my opinion, b4, if now take, knight c4, then we can play bishop e6 as well as a6. I slightly prefer e6 as it keeps an eye on this diagonal as well as the d5 square. a4, denying b3 and allowing us to always find a target on b2. And now it's actually the queen side in our control. We can go for h5, h4. We can bring the rook to b8. We are very happy in this position. for sure. Okay, so if after queen d3, b4, they go knight b5. Now their plan is to play c4 to secure the knight on b5. So we go like, nah, take, bishop e6. As usual, we like to give up the pawn on d6, as now the queen is going to become a problem piece for white. And also we have got some very, very nasty threats to deliver on the king side. And here white is actually best advised to give up the exchange, as otherwise bishop e2 would lock in the bishop-king combo, essentially granting us an extra piece. But this position is actually quite problematic for white as well. Yeah, this endgame is going to look like trouble for white. In particular, the presence of the a-pawns is what should be a concern. Other than that, white would be fine here with the knight being an absolute monster on d5. But because of a2 is going to be an eternal weakness, they have problems here. Okay, so if c4 here, then c4 itself is going to be the target. Knight d6, rook c6, knight f5, queen c7, and the c-pawn is falling. And with that, we can't be worse. That's for sure. Yeah. Okay, so queen h5, as I told you, is the main move here too. Very solid move. We play bishop e6. Now, once gf was played with the idea of bringing the knight to d4, but a simple capture followed by king h8 is going to grant us very handy counterplay. Note that the central pawns don't really represent any sort of danger because either push would make them rigid. So, yeah, white is best advised to prepare the defense, but bishop g4 and then rook g5 followed by rook g8 means that it's still us calling the shots on the king side. Note that rook h5 ideas can be very, very dangerous at certain moments. Obviously, now queen f4 is still on, but it's part of our plans. Black is doing great. So, main idea, bishop h3. This is also, by the way, an important point of queen h5, is that often white wants to play bishop h3 and then not take. Okay, that's not what they want. They want to play bishop f5. Trying to make us take and then wedge the queen on f5, which disallows the second pawn f5 move to be carried out. And even those structures are not terrible entirely for us, because the knight has been denied entry toward d5 anyway. But that's still a positional achievement for white to some degree. So we go d5, since now white lost control of d5 altogether. That's the downside of playing bishop h3. If bishop f5, now we are cool to take because we managed to break the structure. White is trying to keep the queen on e6 at all costs in order to disallow pawn f5. Queen d6 takes. Note that rook e4, queen d3 could be quite awkward at times. And also queen g6 takes, and then the f5 break is incoming, is on the cards. So gf, queen d2, queen e4, f5. We got the f5 in. Rook e2 only, take. And although the position is level, now that we straightened our pawns and we have the bishop against the knight, I don't have any concerns whatsoever. In fact, here, we're still calling some serious shots. And yeah, we're down a pawn, but it's white who is definitely struggling to prove that this position is actually a draw. Last but not least, after d5, if ed, we're going to take rook d1, queen b7, dominating the long diagonal. Bishop f3 is threatened. This is looking really, really cool. So white is absolutely compelled here to do this exchange sack to clarify the situation on the light squares, but it means a penetrating queen and very active pieces for black. And indeed, after 91, queen d2. It's equal according to Stockfish, but if your opponent happens to be a human, I would like to wish them the very best of luck to prove said equality here, because Yeah, it's gonna be tough. Queen b2 is threatened. Yeah, white's pieces are just utterly passive. We are looking really, really happy. So if this is the equality that we are getting in every line, we should be very happy. And friends, that's going to be a wrap up for the g3 bishop g2 variation. It's going to be a reasonably rare guest, I presume, in your life. Unlike the next variation, which I would expect to be frequently popping up in your games, which is going to be the very sharp sacrificial bishop takes b2 piece sac idea. So let's have a look at that one next.